All right, grace and peace to the body. That is the church. So, so tonight's video has changed. The guest is unavailable today, so we will do the Calvinism talk with John another time, whenever he lets me know when he is available. Um, and the title was just last minute because I didn't find out from my guest until just recently, and so I just put Daniel 11 mainly because Daniel 11's on my mind. Due to I'm going to be presenting a walkthrough of Daniel 11 sometime. And do forgive me, I am getting over being sick still. But I'll be presenting a walkthrough of Daniel 11 uh, in preparation for, not preparation, in to give a context of the things I say when I uh, address a video by Advent Defense League. It's going to be part two of the Antiochus video that they have up um, on their YouTube channel. And so, if anybody wishes to join, you are more than welcome to. I won't be on for that long. I'm already pretty tired and still getting over being sick, like I said. On the Calvinism talk, real quick, whether or not Calvinism is actually true as a complete system, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be completely true 100%. I do understand that us and men, we like to put things into a box, a system, because it's nice, neat, and organized. But sometimes the scriptures tend to say things that don't fit in completely with our nice, complete little system. And so, even if Calvinism is not true, like I said, as a system, I think Protestantism, and I use that term in the more restrictive sense, referring to the magisterial Protestants, right? The Anglicans, Lutherans, the Reformed, the various Reformed branches, and all of that, uh, in a general sense, are true. Um, the predestination and the will of man, generally speaking, I do hold to compatibilism, so I mean, I believe those are compatible, and I think the Book of Jonah is a good example of that. Actually, in the Book of Jonah, you have uh, Jonah with his will doing what he wants to do, and yet God accomplishing what he wanted to accomplish from the very start, before Jonah fled. Uh, but I will say there are, in the modern evangelical world, it seems to be more of like a squishy, feel good, make my heart tingle type of Christianity, right? Where everything is just focused on love and only love, as if that's the only thing that exists. Love is definitely important, and I'm glad people focus on that, but there is more than just that. And sometimes I think the modern Christian world gets lost in that imbalance. But reading in Ezekiel 28 the other day, there, whether we're talking about Calvinism or we're talking about a non-Calvinistic system, each position dabbles in philosophy. I've noticed, I listened to a debate between a Calvinist and open theist, and I noticed that both, and the open theist just as much as the Calvinist, has to use philosophy. But each system also has um, hard text they have to address. they have to explain away. And I find it interesting, at the very least, that people will rag on the Calvinists for not being able to just go by the clear words of the text, but having to explain things away. And then I'll listen to like a stream on uh, the topic of predestination, go to the text, and they'll have to explain it away in this great detail. And I'm like, I see some inconsistency here. But I will say this real quick, though, and I'll let you talk, Ren. I was reading Ezekiel 28, and I thought of this Calvinism, non-Calvinism debate. And this popped up. It says, "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take Sidon or Sidon, and prophesy against her, and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Sidon, and I will manifest my glory in your midst." Now, notice that God is going to manifest his glory in Sidon's midst. And what does that mean? "And they shall know that I am the Lord when I execute judgments in her and manifest my holiness in her." Now, notice this. So there's his glory and his holiness is being manifest in Sidon here. What is that? "For I will send pestilence into her and blood into her streets, and the slain shall fall in her midst by the sword that is against her on every side. Then they will know that I am the Lord."
I thought God loved everybody and wanted all to be saved. And if you just put your faith in Jesus, just trust in the Lord, and give a generous donation to this ministry, God will bless you.
Sweet. How much I owe you?
Oh, I'd say about 30 Bitcoin would do me fine. And if you pour as dirt, maybe about, say, 100 and, well, like, I don't know. We'll go ahead and say 300 Ethereum, Ethereum Classic or some such like that. I figure that'll do me just fine.
I got stashed away. I was going to feed my kids with it, but I got stashed away 100 copper pence.
Your money perished with you.
Yes. But isn't that, you don't hear from the non-Calvinists, like the whatever, I don't even care which one. You don't hear much about this right here.
No, they don't talk about God's sovereignty because the truth being told, they worship oftentimes a fake God that is not the actual God of the Bible. And if they are redeemed, it is in spite of their idolatry.
Yeah.
And I am at the point now, especially after dealing with these internet denizens, we will call them, that I don't think the lion's share of them are remotely Christian. And certainly they do not have a Christian worldview. I do not understand how you could consistently maintain a Christian worldview and be an Arminian.
I'll take an Arminian over the. I only know so much about Arminian theology, but I assume they're not free grace.
Well, effectively, the Seventh-day Adventists are Arminian with their hyper legalist additions. You already know Arminianism. You were reared in it. You just reared in one of the more radical forms of it.
Right. Yeah. So I guess so it depends on where it's manifested in. If it's in a one of these restorationist movements, no, thank you. I'll pass on it.
Right.
And they're probably they're definitely a cultic group, regardless of the group. But
of course, I will not call the Adventists a cult because I do not think that they are a full tilt cult. I would disagree with Anthony Hokema on that point, specifically considering that some of them are rather evangelical and are doing everything they can to move away from it. The plain fact of the matter is, until they're willing to call Ellen White a mere commentator, then they have to maintain what Ellen White says. I can hear a friend of mine now, I think you know the exact one I mean, saying, well, show me in her writings where she says that, or well, Ellen White said that, but is that what the church teaches today? And I don't know how else to say this except to say, if this is what you believe, you are willingly dishonest because it's maintained in the fundamental truths. What is it that the Adventists call their little creed?
The what do they call them? The term is escaping me. What do they call it? Why am I forgetting it? It's the 28 fundamentals, or
Right, the 28 fundamentals. And if you simply read them, they tell you right there what they think. It's just, again, they're caught between the rock and the hard place of Ellen White and Protestantism. Do
yeah.
they denounce Ellen White and become Protestant, or do they attempt to appeal to Protestantism? While in point of fact, Ellen White and pioneer Adventists thought that the Protestants were children of Satan.
Oh yeah, yeah. No doubt. No doubt. If you were a
I,
part of Babylon and you rejected the three angels' message, or if you're a part of Protestantism, excuse me, and you rejected the three angels' message, then yeah, most definitely you were a part of Babylon.
Well, and this is where I would like to say to the Adventists, look, you can try to say that's what she said, but is that what they believe? Well, again, this is a dishonest shell game. It's no different than what our dispensationalist friends do when you come to the book of Daniel, as you have on the screen. They can't read it for what it says. They have to assume part of it is proper for today, that the Messiah was in fact cut off. And yet they want to detach the results and the blessing from that at minimum 1,000 years into the future. It's insane. Are you there?
Oh yeah, I was muted.
I thought perhaps you had gone away, or maybe I was having connection problems. I didn't really know.
Yeah, I would obviously differ with you on that point, which it is what it is. I mean, Walter
On the
Martin,
point of what?
them not being a cult. But
Well,
I will
I
say,
am not calling them a full tilt cult. Now, don't think that I'm giving them an excuse either.
yeah, right. Oh no, yeah, it's
I'm saying basically that I don't think that they currently, in their present iteration, meet enough qualifiers to be a cult. I am not saying, however, that they are not dangerously close to what we modernly define as a cult.
right. Yeah, I mean, uh, there are, and I have screenshots. I was trying to find them, but I can't. I have screenshots of when I would talk in the Facebook groups back in the day, and they're on SDA pages, and you have
Mm,
these more evangelical SDAs debating with the more historic, hardcore SDAs.
the ones true to Ellen White.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and there is this change in the church, but I mean, even in my own church that I grew up in, it's not the same church when I grew up. It is a lot more
Mm,
evangelical. It is not historic Adventist like it used to be.
of course not. And how could it be? That is why I'm saying if the church is shifting directions, I am unwilling to call it a cult. But it still is not in the clear until it's willing to say Ellen White was merely a commentator.
Yeah, if an individual church branches away, I mean, because they've had various groups like
Mm-hmm.
the Reformed SDA, you have the Branch Davidian, and so on and so forth. If you see some churches branching away and being more evangelical, which at that point just call yourself a Seventh Day Baptist, really. But
And truth being told, that would be correct because they're effectively free will Seventh day Baptists at that point, with
yeah,
still large amounts of Judaism. But I have a lot more respect for that than I do the current institution of Adventism. You're basically gaslighting me into not accepting exactly what generations of Adventists have believed.
right. When you hear, and I listen to them, the various speeches by the General Conference and the leader of the General Conference, and he makes it pretty darn clear that they are sticking to their historic fundamental beliefs.
Of course, and I don't see why they wouldn't. It's no different than the Pentecostals, except the Pentecostals have changed their doctrine. but they can't get around the fact that their pioneer Pentecostals believed they were the only Christians on the earth. They can't escape the fact that when they believed in the third blessing, it meant the eradication of all sin and utter perfection on this earth. So they find themselves in an interesting conundrum. It's just that they're unwilling to be as mystic or as welcoming and ecumenical as other groups. If they did that, or they took the Mormon approach, they'd be vastly more successful.
Mormons are wild, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know, but you know what I mean. The
Yeah.
Mormons have opened the flood doors to the evangelicals.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's it'll be interesting to see where the SDA church is about, a few years from now, if they still maintain what they're maintaining or not.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
I
I
hope.
think.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I hope they become more evangelical and accept that, and uh, abandon what I would call the cultic parts, their false gospel of 1844 investigative judgment.
Right. Well, I think the main start is their proper identification of Ellen White. I think the rest
Right.
of it will have to result from that. After all, if a group came to say that Ellen White was a woman who had never had her full mental faculties because as a child she was smacked in the head with a stone, which is true, then I don't understand how they couldn't say that then the rest would not eventually fall away. However, as you well know, the ultimate issue there is that there's so much pressure to depart from the Adventist system if you so much as question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's some of those people who have had to leave or got kicked out and all that, or at the very least their positions were taken away. I mean, they probably lost a lot because I know from personal experience here locally, whole families are involved in the school, the church, the whole thing. Their whole life is wrapped up in Adventism. So it's hard to want to leave that. But I don't know if you have.
Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry, it seems if I switch to another app for some reason, it doesn't kick me out, but it does mute me.
Oh yeah, I know you. I couldn't hear you, but now I can.
I was saying I was a fourth generation Pentecostal, the first to leave. What do you think that my family did to me? They couldn't accept it. Especially my grandfather. Oh my Lord, have mercy. They went after me, especially because I couldn't agree with what they were saying. Now, thank God, today they no longer fight me. I think perhaps, though, brother, you see the point.
Yeah.
I couldn't leave. My entire family was in the Pentecostal movement until finally I could no longer stand it. And ironically, it was Mormonism that made me leave because it made me realize that George Wood, who was at the time the general superintendent in 2013 for the Assemblies of God, had an ecumenical conference at Brigham Young University where he said, well, we all don't want the youth to go crow cold to Christ. We all were persecuted and are misunderstood. Well, if that's the case, then why am I here? You've had decades of Assemblies of God ecumenism with the Roman Catholic Church. Are we now opening the doors to anti-Trinitarian cultists?
Right. Yeah. The Lord will bring His people out. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Of course. It's funny you should have Daniel on the screen.
Yes. No, I was. Have you studied chapter 11 recently?
I've read it. Currently, I'm sitting in Ezekiel, so I'm not quite there yet.
Okay. It's just going to be.
I mean, I've obviously read the chapter rather fluently, though, but I haven't read it in a few months. Well, let me say about a month or two would be more accurate. Go on.
No, you're good. I'm going to be responding to an Advent Defense League video here.
Oh.
Part two, and
I find that to be such an unfortunate username. Would go on.
Yes.
We're
Uh,
not we're not defending Jesus, we're defending Advent,
uh,
which means we're defending Adventism.
yeah, exactly. They're proud. They're proud of it. Which I talked to the leader, the originator of that movement years ago. It's been like back when I was on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
like 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm familiar with him. But it's grown. It's grown a little bit. He has more people helping him now. But so he puts out more content. But in the video I'm responding to, I have to watch it again here. But they go into Daniel 11 because they need to link Daniel 11 and 12 and other chapters with chapter 8 in order to help bolster their position on chapter 8. So,
Right. They're just desperate to maintain the shut door prophecy and investigative judgment.
oh, man, yes, yes. Now they would qualify shut door of the holy place and the most holy place, the door is open.
Well, I mean, come on. No one had ever heard of this shut door prophecy until Ellen White, unless, of course, Ellen White stole something that arose from the feverish environment of the burned over district in New York City, which was specifically Palermo, New York, and about 50 other counties
Yep.
that from which Adventism and the other American, I hate to say cults because I don't think that's correct for Adventism itself, at least not today. But nonetheless, they still emerge from this, and not, as they often tried to claim, the Wesleyan holiness movement.
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, number of their pioneers, Ellen's husband, Bates, and the other guy I can't remember names that well. Anyways, they came from the Christian Connection movement. Is that what it was called?
I don't know. I can't right remember, brother. You'll have to forgive me.
Uh,
I'm
sorry.
I'm well studied on Adventism. I am, however, no expert.
Yeah, I forget the names so easily, so annoying. But anyways,
Indeed.
they come from this anti-Trinitarian restoration type of movement,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, and so that was definitely a big part of their birth, so to speak. But I'm going to walk through not walk through, but I'm just going to explain my position. I'm curious if you agree or not. But in Daniel 11 here, you have verse 1's pretty obvious and clear. You have verse 2 talks about Persia. 3 more kings shall be in rise in Persia, so that's pretty clear on who it's talking about. He shall stir up against the kingdom of Greece. Pretty clear as well. So it goes from the ram to the goat, using Daniel chapter 8 language. Then a
I'm
mighty king.
listening.
Yep, and then a mighty king. So verse 3 is talking about Alexander the Great. Verse 4 is that breaking up of Alexander's kingdom into the 4 horns. That's talking about
Mm-hmm.
chapter 8. Now, real quick, what the Adventist has to do is they have to. I'm going to hop down to verse 22 real quick, and this is kind of like they talk about this a little bit in their video because this is very important for their position. The verse 22 is speaking about what chapter 9 is talking about, namely the prince that um, is killed but not for himself. So
I'm listening.
yeah, and so in verse 22 they have these events already happening in Rome, and that's pretty crazy. I have the events of Rome starting in verse 36. So there's a huge jump because in the video I make,
Sorry. Where do they place these events that begin in Rome?
so I believe Rome for them starts around. I'll have to look at my notes again, but around verse 18. But in verse 21 or 22, it talks about they say the crucifixion of Christ is what verse 22 is talking about, where it says,
Wow.
right, armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. They say that's the death of Christ right there, spoken of in chapter 9. I'm like,
That's
Ugh.
So how does the Prince of the Covenant refer to the Lord Jesus?
They'll say what they say is it's the same language in chapter 9. Let's see if I can get to it. Verse 20 uh, CX.
CX. C would be 100, and X, I think, would be 10.
Yes.
However, there's not a single chapter in Daniel's prophecy with that many verses.
Daniel 9, verse 26.
Oh, there it is.
And 27. So this anointed one who is cut off. And then verse 25 as well, they say this anointed one, a prince right there is Messiah, which I agree with, right? And so the verse 26, you have the anointed one shall be cut off and have nothing. In verse 27, you have him making a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And so they say that is talking about the same thing in chapter 11, verse 22 is talking about.
Okay.
Prince of the covenant. Right here, the anointed one is cut off, making a strong covenant with many for 1 week.
Well, that doesn't seem to be a very strong argument of if that's what the Advent Defense League is arguing.
Yeah, they make a number of points. Like they'll make, I can't repeat them all right now, but like where it talks about verse 20, then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. They'll say that is referring to what's talked about in the Gospels. Oh man, I'm just blanking on names today. Tiberius Caesar, is that who it is? Who?
Tiberius Caesar.
Yeah, where he has the attacks go out in all the lands. That's what they say this is referring to here. So they kind of try to make those connections. The issue that I see is when you walk through all of this historical data, starting at verse 5, you're walking through the kingdom, through the conflict between the king of the south, who is the Ptolemaic kingdom, and the Seleucid kingdom is the kingdom of the north. And so verse 5,
correct.
right, exactly, yeah. And so you got from the first kings of each kingdom, king of south, north, here in verse 5, and then it goes through their lineage with different events, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that happens all the way to verse 21. And the 21 is where I believe it transitions to Antiochus and what is spoken of in chapter 8. And so it says, in his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flattery. Excuse me, I'm still getting over being sick.
You're excused, and of course, the Pentecostal would have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, brother. You might want to go to the doctor." I mean, doctors are from Satan. Don't do that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, God bless him. I love him to death. Don't get me wrong. It just the way you feel about Adventists, I feel about Pentecostals.
I hear you. I had this one guy who was eating at my cart, and he ended up being a Pentecostal. We talked a bunch, but he was the oneness Pentecostal, not the Trinitarian one. So he was.
The fun ones.
Yes.
And don't get me started on what the Trinitarians are doing with their oneness counterparts, because they'll just call them brethren despite the fact that they don't even affirm the Trinity.
Oh man, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
Oh yes, there's been large ecumenical talks for years between the Trinitarian and Oneness Pentecostals, you're looking at about 30 to 50 million Oneness and about 500 to 700 million plus in the charismatic movement.
Wow.
Easy, easy. So you're looking at a tremendous numeration of people, where a century ago there was an official split between the two camps. However, in the last, I'd say, half a century, there has been a dramatic change in the way that the Trinitarian Pentecostals have been engaging with their oneness counterparts. And at the high levels, they just call them brothers,
That's wild.
despite the fact that the oneness haven't changed their views.
Yeah, no. That guy that I ended up becoming friends with was very rabidly, I would say, anti-Trinitarian. It was,
Well, yeah, and that's what always mystifies me about it. These guys are about as Trinitarian as a safety squat bar. I mean, come on, man. I could find more sympathy with apostate prophet, quite literally.
yeah, right. Now he is he's an atheist, huh?
Yes, he's the ex-Muslim atheist who's been very critical of Islam, especially considering that he was a communist radical that was trained basically to be, I don't want to say a jihadist because that doesn't sound fair, but he did receive the training to where he was a very strict Muslim. But getting back to the point, it gets on my nerves when I see that nonsense with the Trinitarians. So let us not veer off topic any further, because I will rant for a long, long time.
No, you're good. I was already starting to. I forgot what the point I was making.
You were engaging with Daniel 9, verse 26.
Yeah, I think I was going somewhere, but I can't remember. It was a busy day today. Oh, it is fascinating thinking about, in the past from my business when I first opened up. We would set tables out in the summertime, obviously, so people can eat and enjoy the food. And I'll tell you, man, I got the privilege and the enjoyment to talk to all kinds of people. There was this Jew from Israel who lives in town here, and falafel is what he always wanted to eat. But we would talk, and he ended up talking scripture with me at the tables between customers, and he ended up being a Socinian. What were he had some other weird beliefs, but man, it was fascinating hearing his stories about Israel. But I was like, I didn't understand where that Socinian type of belief came from. The only thing I could think of was him being
Faustus Sozzini, but Socinians were some of the original heretics, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's I got the Pentecostal that I talked to. I had Jehovah's Witnesses.
In fairness, the Oneness Pentecostal.
Oneness Pentecostal. Yes, exactly. Who are brothers with Trinitarians now, apparently. Just checking.
No, the Trinitarian Pentecostals. I never said they were my brothers in Christ.
But I always enjoy when the Mormons come in and the Mormon missionaries come and talk. They caught me off guard once because I usually try to keep certain books in my cart. One is my quad, and I have notes on there so I can refresh my memory. But
quad,
the quad, yeah.
Well, you're not meaning quadricep or quadrangle.
No, it's like the triple for the Mormons. The triple is the Book of Mormon. Covenant or Pearl.
Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price.
The quad has the KJV Bible with it.
Oh, the Mormon version of the King James Version.
Yeah, exactly. But I always enjoy it when they come because they're fun to talk to.
Well, they're interesting because they're mail order. In fact, nowadays they'll go digital, so you can request to speak to the Mormons, and you don't even have to have them come out. They'll just meet with you digitally. They'll meet you wherever you want. So I have a charismatic friend who had the bright idea to start studying on Mormonism, and that's what he started doing. And then I thought, well, actually, I'm pretty well versed with Mormon theology. Maybe I should do that too. That's easy evangelism, man.
Yeah, especially with the elders, quote unquote, because they're newer in the faith of Mormonism, or they may have been raised in it, but they're still young, is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm when a 26-year-old person is referred to as elder, I just find that astonishing. I don't find it astonishing that one could be a dutifully ordained Christian elder, an actual real elder,
Right.
if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
At a young age. But the way in which they mean it, imagine a 78-year-old man answering to this 26-year-old young pup in front of him who demands that he is called elder.
I wouldn't. I'd be like, nah, I'm good. Man. But yeah. Anyways, all right. So up to verse 20 is talking about the kingdoms of the king of the north and the south, who I say is Seleucid and Ptolemaic kingdom. Verse 22 is where, or verse 21 is where it transitions into Antiochus and his activities with the Jews. And that's why I believe, at least right now, that's what verse 22 is talking about, where army shall be utterly swept away before him and broken. This is Antiochus with his army,
Right.
even Prince of the Covenant. And I am not completely persuaded, but I hold to this now, that it's referring to the high priest in Israel. And we know, I'm sure you know the history, that Onias III was taken out of his position as high priest, and then the Greeks.
Correct. There were, I was about to say, the unique occurrence of two high priests during that time.
And I believe the first one in his place, that was put in his place, was his younger brother, I believe. And then another one after that.
I am not going to claim to know. I am not going to claim to know, my brother.
Okay, I think his name was Jason, or anyways. I believe that's what that is referring to. So if we go down 23, 24, all the way down to verse 35, you have the activity of what's called the Little Horn chapter 8. And that's what I'll be
correct.
Kind of talking about in that video with Advent Defense League. They make other points.
Are you going to share the video?
Yeah, I'll play it and then respond to it. I did one already that I shared with Academy Apologia, because he does a lot of videos against it, and he shared it on his community page. So
wonderful.
Yeah, so, and then I'll be doing number 2, which is that's what this one is right now. But and then verse 36, all the way down to the end of the chapter, is referring to what happens under the fourth beast, that is Rome. And it's also spoken of in chapter 9, verses 26 and 27. So that's my general outline of chapter 11. I don't know if you agree, disagree.
Well, I don't think I'm hearing anything that's just dramatically wrong, if that's what you're asking.
No, just if you had, because I know there's slight differences. There are people who believe the whole chapter is referring to the Greek kingdom. I don't believe that.
Well, again, brother, I'd have to read it again, and I have not focused on this. And as you know, I don't focus on Adventism. We have a teeny tiny Adventist church in my area, but the irony is they're even smaller than we Reformed.
Really?
We only have about 2 churches in the area that are Reformed or somewhat Reformed. The third one is Full Tilt Federal Vision, Doug Wilson lover,
Oh man.
and Tom.
I said, oh man, I don't like
I
that.
know, right? So you have to realize, it's not that I wouldn't so-called not waste my time on Adventists, but the likelihood in this city that I'd run into an Adventist versus the likelihood that I'd run into a Catholic is incomparable. I am absolutely going to run into a Catholic as soon as I exit my door.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It just gives me a funny image in my head when you say that.
So it's not. I hope you understand. It's not that I don't care about Adventism. It's just it's not really an issue around here.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you, man. It's and this stuff here that I talk about a lot is definitely SDA specific.
All
Uh,
right.
Beyond that, I mean, there's not much use at all, and I definitely understand that. And there are,
Well, there is use in evangelism, but again, I've often met Adventists that if you nail it down, they actually believe in justification by faith without works because they've somehow, independent of their Adventism, have come to believe that.
yes, I would say they switched. A lot of the more evangelical ones will be more consistent a little bit, but they hold to it inconsistently, or they don't realize it. There is definitely. I remember doing Revelation seminars as a kid, and you had most of the time you had in the first because it was like a month long or something like that, where each week there'd be a couple of sermons, and the first couple ones would open up with the Reformation, solas, and all of that, and then they get into their specific, unique doctrines. And the issue, as you are well aware of, is that a lot of their doctrines contradict the opening solas of the Reformation. But at
Right. I
least
mean,
they're
I've
inconsistent.
heard of these. I've heard of these Revelation conferences having big banners or emblems of the solas, and I always thought that was ironic that an Adventist would even bother with such a thing because clearly that's not what they believe.
Yeah, I wish they would just get beyond that because they're. I mean, look at their beliefs. They're definitely not of the Reformation lineage. They are definitely radical Reformation lineage or
Oh yes,
radical Reformation.
their forebears would unquestionably be the Anabaptists, and the most radical of them to boot, because it was the Anabaptists to introduce the heresy of soul sleep, and it was some of they who were Seventh Day Sabbatarians. So certainly they are not part of the Protestant Reformation by any means.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The thing with Anabaptists is they're so wide, so many beliefs that were just radical and just out there. You have like the groups you mentioned, then you have these groups that are uh, like the SDs as well too, where they're apocalyptic, where they're saying the end time is now, Christ is coming soon, get ready, and they're taking over cities, they're doing all kinds. And then you have like these violent uh, movements that are Anabaptist as well. It just Anabaptism was everywhere on the map. A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
whenever I hear a Catholic say, "Well, you know what? Because of sola scriptura, you got like 33,000 denominations," and I'm thinking,
Which is actually untrue.
which is ridiculously untrue. But what they're really addressing is not the Protestants; it's the radical reformers, because the Protestants more or less have stayed the same, but the radical
Mm-hmm.
reformers are just like, blah, they're like everywhere. and there's all these
Well,
different
yeah.
wild beliefs. What I mean everywhere is like their beliefs are across the board of like everything.
Well,
Anything
yes,
else you
they
can
have
think
an
of.
evangelical. They have an Anabaptist cacophony.
Yeah, no, like a smorgasbord. Yeah, like a buffet. Oh man, it's wild. Like learning the history of the Anabaptists.
Totally agree.
What I find it ironic is like a lot of them were pacifists, but you have uh those violent radical ones that were also Anabaptists, who were started revolutions and taking over cities, our towns, and just wild.
Well, now related more toward Adventism, I wonder if you could enlighten me as to why Jamie Russell would not debate with me, although you can't obviously speak for him, on the subject of Adventist views on the Sabbath, because I was going to have a friendly discussion with, again, my friend on the subject of the fact that no, the Adventists are not the Adventists, but the Protestants didn't change the Sabbath, and we have no laws on the books or that we've ever proposed to do what the Adventists claim we're going to do.
Right. And he would not debate you on that? Interesting.
And he said yes, and then he wouldn't do it. And it seems that no Adventists are willing to do that because I was going to explain to them the Roman Catholic Church did not claim to change the Sabbath. They only claimed to interpret the fathers.
Right.
They claimed that they were continuing in the tradition of the fathers, and the Reformed have not disagreed with that because there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, obviously, in that respect. So I'm wondering, why would an Adventist, despite this being such a key critical component of Adventism, refuse to take up this debate? Because it's no minor feature of the Adventist faith.
No, it's definitely a very important part of their beliefs. That's fascinating. I personally would say it's probably because there's not a lot of evidence for that position, really, to be honest with you. But
Well, yeah. I'm not even so much asking, hammering on Jamie. I'm more so talking about why would an Adventist in general not want to do that? Because I just
oh,
I don't comprehend.
to get an Adventist to actually, Jamie's kind of unique here because he
Yeah,
generally,
he's one of the few.
yeah, he'll talk with most people about everything. But generally speaking, Adventists do not debate. They kind of stick in their bubbles.
Well,
You
not to mention we saw what happened this year when one of them tried to debate. And although I'm not sticking up for answering Adventism per se, we all know what happens when they try to debate outside of the Adventist world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They'll have their little debates on their unique teachings or whatever. But yeah, definitely, it, it's really hard. Like I've had a few on my channel to talk with and kind of dialogue back and forth, but I have to walk on like eggshells almost because if I get too aggressive, they'll book it out of here, no doubt, no doubt.
Right. Well, I don't understand it, my brother. Certainly I don't. And in fact, what I find amazing about it is that I don't understand the Jehovah's Witnesses debate. They even have mock debates. The Mormons will debate, but
Yeah,
the Adventists will not debate. And I don't understand why they will not debate that the Sabbath day has been changed, because that's what they all believe. Every Adventist alive
yeah,
thinks that the Roman Catholic Church changed the Sabbath. It is a distinctive feature of Adventism. In fact, it's funny because many other Sabbatarians, Seventh-day Sabbatarians, although they may believe that, don't necessarily even make the argument that the Catholic Church changed the Sabbath. They may agree with the notion, but that's not the core basis of their argument, much less a fundamental feature of their religion.
yeah. No, it's definitely very important because it's part of their belief that the Roman Catholic Church is the beast of Revelation, and he thinks to change the
Correct.
times and laws, and say that's just
And importantly, that the Protestants are children of the beast.
yes, yes,
We are in error because we are continuing the tradition of the fathers, where the Catholic Church has actually not erred for the most part. But we are also doomed, according to Ellen White and other pioneer Adventists.
no
So I
doubt.
don't understand why an Adventist would be so ardent about that claim and then refuse to debate about it, because all I have to demonstrate is what the Catholic Church has taught about the Sabbath.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, they're just it might be too much of the soy meat. I don't know. They're just too sensitive sometimes, or a lot of times.
Um,
Too much
Sounds
so
to me like
perky.
and well, it's funny because Presbyterians are no strangers to debates,
Right.
and yet, that's certainly not the case for good old Adventists. Now, I'm curious. Tell me about the Adventist Defense League. Do they debate, or do they just make defense videos again for Adventism from their own materials and sources that they think support their doctrines?
You could probably get them to debate. Yeah, probably Edwin would debate. I'm not sure about the other guys. I'm not familiar with them, but Edwin would debate. I think he's debated a Roman Catholic on something before. Uh, I can't remember what, but yeah, they probably would. Yeah.
Well, you will forgive my interruption of your broadcast. It seems I've seriously sidetracked you.
There was no really direction. I was actually going to talk Calvinism, Calvinism with it.
So you must be related to those mysterious Calvinists I keep hearing about. I've never met one, but every time I talk to an anti-Calvinist, I'm suddenly a Calvinist that is unsaved.
Oh man, you, man, I don't. It is just boggled my mind. Back when I first learned about Calvinism, I didn't see as nearly as much anti-Calvinism, but now people if these people believe that Calvinism is not a part of the Christian tradition and they're not a Christian denomination, then okay, fine, I can understand their aggression. I mean, doctrinally, calling them cults, whatever.
Mhm.
But if you see them as brothers in the faith, I don't understand what the aggression is for. I don't understand why you're so vehemently against Calvinism or Reformed theology or whatever you want to call
I don't either. It's amazing that they are so hostile, and yet we are not calling for violence against them. They are calling for violence against us.
it. Oh
Then
yeah,
they play the victim, saying John Calvin was a murderer. No, Calvin was not a murderer, and that doesn't actually prove your argument there, buddy.
oh man, I can't even. Sometimes when I see people just in the live, I'm sure you see these all the time in the live chat. Calvin murdered Servetus or whatever. I'm just I can barely take it. I'm like,
Well, I just don't engage with them anymore because I will tell them you are historic. You are being ahistorical. You are repeating revisionist history, and then move on.
yeah, yeah. It is so insanely simplistic that I have to just do the same thing, just move on. I can't deal with it. And it's like you don't understand obviously the historical context that they're living in. You don't understand what the politics are like. You don't understand
Correct.
the context that John Calvin was in with, Farrell first off, or with uh, Martin Bootser and these other reformers. You don't understand the context with the Roman Catholic Church and being against them as well too, and then having to deal with heretics and the laws of the land at the time, and so on and so forth. You just want to say, well, Calvin murdered somebody, and that's it. You just, oh my
Correct. They also just want to completely ignore the fact that the Protestants were being merciful, and the only time Calvin condoned the execution was when he recognized that he could not stop the secular diet of worms, which is basically the law enforcement arm of the secular government, from executing Servetus. So he tried to petition for a more humane way that Servetus may pass, despite that his objections weren't heard.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I never hear a single one of those individuals talk about why, when Calvin told Servetus, "Do not," I repeat, "do not come to Geneva." I'm gonna say that again. Do not come because this is gonna happen. And what does Servetus do?
Yeah, and see what Servetus went, and the thing that many don't understand is that the attitude at the time was to treat him as a heretic, which meant he needed to be punished. What the people don't realize is that Servetus was a genius, though he was effectively what we would call today a terrorist. Had the Protestants not got a hold of him, the Catholic Inquisition was actively seeking him.
Well, right. Well, at first, Rome had him in prison, but he broke out, and when he broke out is when Calvin told him, "Do not come to Geneva because then you'll be tried and you'll be executed."
You will be tried and executed. Then it's one of the great mysteries of modern history. Why did Servetus go to Geneva?
Right. It's like you escape prison and you're free now. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna go and live the rest of your
Go and
life?
attack. Go. No, I'm going to try to steal John Calvin's home from him and raise. I'd be a rabble rouser in Geneva. That's what I'm going to do.
It, that is just, and the genius that he was. The best theory that I heard was that he did have an apocalyptic, the end was coming soon mindset, and so maybe that played a part in his decision to do that. Other than that, I have absolutely no clue why he chose to go there.
Well, who
I
who
mean,
knows what that heretic thought, right? But I guess it's also the same question that I would ask the Adventist. You actually believe that I, as a Protestant, am going to believe in Ellen White?
yeah, right.
You
No,
actually think I'm going to take this mesmeric woman seriously who was struck in the head as a child with a stone?
yeah, no, no, yeah, it's ah man, I don't understand why well, I do understand why, but I mean, it's that whole doublespeak that I was telling you about, right? You have sola scriptura. Yes, we believe in sola scriptura. Then you got the teachers Ellen G. White and her writings. Oh well, they're not. No, no, they're not an addition to the. They're to point us back to the Bible. See that? See that double speak right there? But yet
Right, so
she,
which is to say that if they direct us to the Bible, that is an admission that they are an authority.
an inspired authority. But her claim was that if the people of her time were following what the Bible taught, her ministry, her inspiration would not have been needed. And I'm thinking,
Well, it never.
why?
But it never was. That's the thing. It never
Exactly.
was, despite the fact that this is merely a copy of the Shakers. As you're aware, there was another group called the radical group of heretical Presbyterians, the Chamberites, I think it was called, or something like this, in the 1820s, that preached exactly, almost exactly what Ellen White believed, et cetera, et cetera. And that's to say nothing of the fact that from 1700 until 1850, there were many groups that taught exactly what Ellen White taught. So I believe it's more likely that her mesmeric visions were simply a theft of what was already out there.
Yeah, it definitely could be a huge part of it. But if we are to say that what she said, at least on some versions, were true, she definitely had some sort of out of body experience a time or two. But if it was all just that mesmerism and that acting type of stuff, then most definitely she was stealing, no doubt. But it's I think of when she says, and I take it serious, when she says, if the people were following what the Bible taught, my mission would not be needed. The spirit of prophecy in her writings would not be needed. And I'm
Right.
on what exactly? Okay, there were already Seventh Day Baptists. Okay, so the Sabbath was already taken care of, which really, as you well know, they weren't keeping the Sabbath properly to begin with, even though she was inspired and said that they were, which they weren't. So what other truth was it? There apparently you guys believe in the solas. Okay, those were already there. Justification by faith, that was there already. Premillennialism, that was already there. Oh, your version of historicism, which really, uh, their additions to historicism is not even historicism, because if historicism by definition is prophecy being unveiled through history, and you can look at history and see the events happening and say, yes, that this time this pope did this, and that's how this prophecy started. Well, 1844, nothing happened. It was just a false prophecy. So that's not an
Well,
addition.
actually, something did happen. It's historically known as the Great Disappointment.
Yeah, a false prophecy happened. And that's not going to help your
That's
case.
my point. That something did happen. It was called the Great Disappointment.
Yeah, and so many people lost. Oh man, that'd be rough. That'd be rough. But okay, so you don't really have anything to add to historicism, and that was already there. Uh, what exactly what was there in the church that was not happening? Was it the dietary
Well,
law?
no, I would imagine that could be their only argument, but they weren't the only ones to teach that.
Yeah, it's just
But
such
either
a
way,
like a shallow excuse or reason to follow her inspired writings. Really, it's
I
beyond me.
know. Well, again, the only claim they have is the spirit of prophecy.
Which which I don't know what your take is on when Revelation talks about the spirit of prophecy, but I hold to it referring to John's revelation that was given to him on Patmos.
I would tend to think that might be what it's talking about. I know it's not talking about Ellen White.
No, no, no.
I suppose that our Adventist friends haven't realized the massive discontinuity there, that the book of Revelation is written about 90 AD. Alan White didn't exist until the 18th century. How is that spirit of prophecy suddenly unfulfilled for all these years?
Oh man, I can't even stand when you ask them that kind of question. They say, "Well, the reformers were inspired." Okay, they were inspired, and so was Ellen White, and
Well,
so
if the reformers are inspired, then you're saying basically what the reformers said is inspired, despite the fact that you say that the reformers are unsaved.
no, you mean they mean inspired, like uh, you're motivated.
Okay, so we're just we're playing word games at this point.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I always like to say, I always like to ask, it's like, so the, they believe in the gifts of the Spirit, right? Even though they never practiced the tongues part, they just focus on the prophecy and only in Ellen White. I always like to ask,
Right, and it's they're radically anti-tongues, and yet you could
very,
definitely be Ellen White if that's fine.
but I'm like, okay, there has to be some other prophets, in earlier times. Uh, how about, and I like to bring up the Shepherd of Hermas in that writing. Why don't you hold to that as
Right,
inspired truth? Because he claimed,
right,
not claimed, but he had the prophetic visions and everything. Uh, and there's some truth in there that he talks about, but he does add to the scriptures just like Ellen G. White does. So why don't we hold to that as well? And then why don't we go to why not some things that the Montanists said in the fourth century? They had the visions and the gifts and all that? Why don't we hold to some of the things they taught? So on and so forth. But anyways, I think I am actually gonna get off. You
Okay,
there, bud?
that's fine with me. It's fine with me. It was a pleasure to talk to you tonight.
Yeah, man. I appreciate getting on and chit chatting.
Well, it's always fun. It's always fun. It's better than the alternative.
Oh man, I what? Oh, whose channel was it? It was. Oh yeah, you were there. What? It was Praise's channel. Who was? Oh man, I'm trying to think of who was on there. They're saying some wild stuff. I was trying to remember. Anyway, I lost it. Never mind. I forgot.
Well, you're wasting your mind. You are wasting your capacity with praise, and I have no trouble saying that anymore. That is about the lowest level of YouTube Christianity that you could possibly
Oh
conceive.
no, I don't go on. Actually, the only time I've gone on there was when you're on there, and I was talking with you for a minute. But no, I went on there
That's
one
right.
time, and there was I actually I probably won't repeat it. Never mind. It was wild stuff, man. It's crazy. Like what?
Well, I don't want to dwell on it, but it's not inaccurate to call them redneck trailer trash, and the channel is just an extension of that.
Yeah, yeah. It gets pretty wild, and actually, the guy that was going to talk tonight, John Myers here.
Yeah, I like him.
He was on there, and I happened to just click on the link because I'll listen for a couple minutes, and he was saying he was being followed. A bunch of people were attacking him, so I'm like, "Hey, man, what's your email?
Oh yeah.
What's your email so we can hang out and talk?" So I was hoping to kind of like bring him out of that environment, and we can start hanging out and talking. Hopefully, you guys and CJ can as well too. And because he seemed like a nice individual, seems decently knowledgeable, and it'd be fun to talk to him. But I'm like, what are you doing in Praise's channel, man? That place is wild.
Well, all I would say to John is that what you haven't learned yet is that praise actively hates Calvinism. And your attempt to minister to these rabid, very binary, black and white anti Calvinists is admirable. You just haven't figured out that this is pretty much the lowest level, John, of YouTube so called debate. And actually, it makes you look pretty poor when you appear over there. It's why you don't see me over there on the panels much. And it's certainly why you will see me trolling in the chat. I mean, after all you have to say to get Praise to lose his mind is when are you going to flip flop again? Because we all know Praise never changes his mind randomly in the middle of a stream about major doctrinal positions.
I've heard some people claim that of him. I've not known him enough to witness it. I don't
Oh,
know.
in the last I've known him for 3 to 4 years now, and he has changed his opinions so many times that I will just look him dead in the face and say, Praise, you need a pastor and you need to repent.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, brother, I imagine you're going to shut her down, so I shan't keep you.
Yeah, man. I thank you for coming on and just chit chatting the random stuff. I appreciate it.
Well, you've made my brain pour out of my ears. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I consider that an honor. Thank you.
All right, brother. Well, you have a pleasant night.
Grace and peace to you, bro. All right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna end the stream. It was a no topic stream just to talk about whatever. I laid out my position, but I'll say it real quick here to sum it up. Verses in Daniel 11, because I'm going to be doing a video addressing the Advent Defense League video on Antiochus and why he's not the little horn. Okay, so verse 5 to verse 20 refers to the kingdoms of Ptolemy, the kingdoms of Seleucid, and their activities through the generations. So starting with the first rulers, so Ptolemy the first and Seleucid the first. that goes down through their descendants all the way to verse 20. And then in verse 21 here, you'll have to excuse the stuffy nose. I am sick, for those who don't know. Verse 21 here is where Antiochus rises. So notice here it says, in his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. Now that is important because Antiochus was not actually next in line when his brother Seleucid the fourth died. It was actually Seleucid's son Demetrius the first who was to be the ruler next. And at the same time, this person who arises, who is Antiochus, was a prisoner of war in Rome. So from there, verse 21 to verse 35, we have the activities of the little horn described in chapter 8. Verse 36 through verse 45 is the activities of the fourth beast and what happens in chapter 9, verse 26 and 27. With that being said, grace and peace to everybody. God bless.